Our next speaker is Richard Lynch from Teagasc. He's a research officer and he will present the ValproPath projects. Unfortunately, he couldn't join either, but he left us a message.
Hello, my name is Richard Lynch and I am the project manager of the European funded project ValproPath. ValproPath is an acronym for New Value Landscapes for Plant Protein Pathways. And the project itself was funded by Horizon Europe under Cluster 6 funding call to develop sustainable and competitive land-based protein crop systems and value chains. So if you ask the question, why do we need ValproPath? Well, as it stands, Europe's plant protein landscape is not fit for purpose. And what I mean by that is that there's a lack of premium supply chains which exist for primary producers, which means that they have financial instability and they lack independence. The reason for this, I suppose, is that there's a large focus as it stands to produce feedstuffs for the livestock sector across Europe, predominantly the pig and poultry sector, in a bid to try and counter the import of high protein content feeds. There's also a heightened societal awareness from consumers for alternative sources of dietary protein. And consumers are becoming more and more aware of the carbon neutrality of their product and the traceability of their product before they purchase it. So all of these factors need to be taken into account before we develop or design any new food system. So what do we need to do in the project? Well, I suppose we need to demonstrate, firstly, the potential of a select number of protein crops as pathways to new business models. So we need to focus on what is the right crop to grow in the right place. And then when that crop is grown, how do we market that crop in the right marketplace to develop the highest premium for that? We also need to evaluate any new and novel innovative processing techniques which could be implemented to add added value to our end products. And all the while, we need to be very vigilant that stakeholders are empowered to make this transition towards these new types of production systems. The crops of interest in ValproPath are predominantly pulses. So we're focused on lupins, soybeans, chickpea, lentils, field peas, faba beans, and to a small extent, peanut. All of these crops are greater than 15% protein content. They are leguminous crops, so they can fix nitrogen freely from the atmosphere and are very beneficial to agriculture and to follow-on crops. They're highly suitable to the European climate, and of course, we hope that they will deliver a high premium potential for all the different actors in the supply. In terms of the different premium potentials that exist, I suppose there's two main market outlets. The first one is food. We know that protein crops can be very high in fiber, protein, and of course, vitamins and minerals. They can be low in cholesterol. And there's a lot of market to show that the plant-based food industry has grown very much so in the last 4 to 5 years. The latest figure I can get on this is that it's grown by 50% between 2018 and 2020. There's, however, a disparity in the fact that 1/3 of all the plant protein then that's consumed by European citizens is being imported. So I think there is a large gap here that we can exploit by improving our indigenous supply of plant protein crops into the food industry. For the feed sector, of course, we need to counter our reliance on imported feeds or imported high protein feeds such as our soybean and so on. And this graph clearly illustrates that there's a large reliance on the importation of soybean complex in the European Union. So we need to address many of the unanswered questions that the main actors in the supply chain have. And when I speak about the main actors, I'm talking about producers, processors, and food manufacturers. So the first, I suppose, actor really would have a number of questions related to the crop in terms of whether or not they would get a return from their crop if they do grow this crop. What is the best crop they could grow in their region? And how can they maximize the potential yield and quality of their crop? They also, in terms of processors, they need to know, look at, is it worthwhile investing in a processing facility, and can they get consistent supply of raw materials if they do set up that processing facility. Further on, then they'll need to know what technologies are useful to implement, the most up-to-date and latest technologies that can deliver the highest value to their end product. In terms of food manufacturers, they want to know what is the best market, and is there even a market for plant-based products, and what products should I make to exploit that marketplace. They also need to know, is there a consistent supply of plant-based flours and isolates that they can formulate their products from. So the project itself, I suppose, is broken into 6 work packages, 5 of which are shown on your screen here. And all of the different tasks within those work packages interlinked. This is just a brief illustrative diagram to show you the different connections. But really what we're trying to cover is all aspects of the supply chain and go into great detail on how we can improve upon these as the project progresses. I'd just like to show you now in the following slides some of the main tasks which we were completing in the project. So one of the first tasks which we were undertaking is to evaluate the current plant protein production system and supply chain across Europe as it stands. So we're evaluating what the knowledge gaps and obstacles are out there at the moment, and what good practices are in place in Europe in terms of the value chain. We're doing this through a literature review, a number of expert interviews with key stakeholders in different areas of the value chain, and obviously stakeholder workshops are a very important part of this, where we can get a co-design approach to developing these novel value chains going forward. Another important activity is to develop an optimization model so we can determine where is the best location for a processing facility or a number of processing activities to plant proteins. And the reason we need to know this is that we can reduce our transport costs in transporting these raw materials or end products, and also reduce our environmental impact by doing so. But on top of this, there may be the opportunity to valorize potential side streams from some of these processing activities, and we really want to exploit those different valorization streams to make sure that we add as much premium to the supply chain as possible. So ultimately, as I said, we need to grow the right crop in the right place and have the right market for all the end products from that crop. One of the very important activities in the project will be to test a number of varieties of lupins, field pea, faba bean, chickpea, lentil and peanut in 5 different regions across Europe. So these are Ireland, Denmark, Germany, Italy and Portugal. And the ultimate aim of all of this will be to generate a database that's searchable and fully accessible to other researchers and breed companies, where this database will contain the phenotypic data, whether or not that variety was resilient to different abiotic stressors. And ultimately the aim will be that farmers can select the highest value crop based on the downstream value of that crop for their region to implement in their region. Another important activity in the project will be where we will evaluate different innovative processing approaches to some of our protein crops once we have grown them. So we're going to test the on-farm feasibility of pre-processing in terms of dehulling, milling and extrusion. We're also going to have a look at different methods to isolate the protein content from these crops, whether we use wet versus dry fractionation, and different ways of cooking this product, such as microwave processing. One of the main outputs of this task will also be to develop a nutrient tracking dashboard, and we will use infrared spectroscopy to do this at farm level, so that we can track nutrients the whole way through from field or farm level to fork. Within the project, we're also trying to evaluate end products that we could formulate from some of our plant-based protein crops. So we're looking at developing confectionery products using pea and bean flour, such as breads and pastas and plant-based beverages. And also, in addition, we're looking at different levels of inclusion into meat-based products to develop either hybrid or complete meat-free products. On top of this, we'd like to evaluate the sensory aspects of all of these products and that they stand up to consumer acceptance. And finally, the aim is to capture all of this information and develop a life cycle analysis of the economic, environmental, and social benefits of all our supply chains and business models from farm to fork. Ultimately, the aim is to produce a number of sustainable business models which different actors in the supply chain, such as producers, processors, and food manufacturers, can take up, and we can give them confidence to empower them to transition towards more plant-based protein production systems. So the project, just a brief overview, began in September the 1st, 2022. It runs for 4 years. It's roughly has received about €10 million in funding, and it has a good mix of industry and academic partners, with 22 partners in total. It's coordinated by Teagasc, the organisation which I work in, which is the Irish Agriculture and Food Development Authority. If you require any further information on the project, please do not hesitate to either have a look at our website, which you can see the address for here, or contact myself or Ewan Mullins, the project coordinator, at the email addresses on your screen now. Thank you.